I've known Matthew since childhood, and our families are of similar social standing. We treat each other with respect. We're together partly because of the intertwined family interests and partly because of love. But this love has now gone bad. We haven't slept in the same bed for 2 years. He often doesn't come home or comes back very late. He tells the butler not to wake me up and sleeps in the guest room directly. It seems that he has someone else. I try hard to maintain a harmonious appearance with him, turning a blind eye to things. But he doesn't want to hide it anymore. 1 week before the wedding, he came clean with me. He said he still wanted to marry me. He also said he loved me, but just like a dead tree, he couldn't help being attracted to young omegas like raindrops. He suggested that I also go and meet new people to get what he can't give me now. Of course, I didn't agree. He said this wasn't a negotiation but just an announcement to me. Moreover, he openly brought his lover back to our home. I saw that young omega who was described as raindrops. There was a night fog in his dark eyes. He had long seaweed-like eyelashes, petal-like lips, and fair and slender fingers like freshly peeled bamboo shoots. The moment I saw him, I felt the rustling sound of something breaking through the ground under my skin. Matthew said his name was David. When he introduced this omega to me, it was like showing me a treasure he had collected for years. The way he looked at David was obsessed, satisfied, and even a bit proud for having such a treasure. This made me heart ache. David is very docile. He is taken good care of and thus has nothing to do. Matthew tells him to speak, and he speaks, tells him where to sit, and he will sit there motionless. My attitude is not exactly friendly, but my upbringing prevents me from embarrassing David. After David left, I asked Matthew to stay. You should have let David move in here after breaking up with me. I broke up with him. David won't move in here. I've prepared a luxury apartment for David. Matthew said, smiling indifferently, I also don't intend to break up with you. No one can replace you. And have you forgotten? Ours is a business marriage. We never had a say in the first place. If anything goes wrong, it'll be bad for everyone. On Valentine's Day, Matthew booked the best restaurant and hotel in the city to spend the whole day with David. He thought he hadn't hidden anything from me, so he asked me on his own initiative what kind of gifts are most appealing these days. I'm emotionally stable and value decency, but I have no intention of offering advice for his absurd behavior. Not getting an answer from me, Matthew acted as if nothing had happened and still said goodbye to me with a big smile. He showed no apology to me. Before leaving, he sincerely advised me to go to a gathering of our mutual friends. Matthew is cruel. He ignores my wishes and is certain that I'll consider the overall situation and won't leave him. It seems that I've been gradually shaped into this by him. First, there was an unfamiliar perfume, then lipstick marks, hair strands, ambiguous text messages, intimate photos, hickeys. First, he would seriously make excuses. Later, when I brought it up, he would just smile, which was like an admission. After countless times of self-doubt, countless breakdowns and self-repairs, I thought I had given up my illusions and accepted that he had his secrets outside. But now he doesn't even bother to hide it.
I'm exhausted.
I asked the driver to take me to the law firm. Matthew and I were originally a perfect match. We had a deep affection for each other, and the interests between our two families were intricate and intertwined. Everyone thought we would definitely get married. I used to think so too. So we have a lot of real estate with confused ownership and quite a few jointly operated companies. We are so closely related that a single move can affect the whole situation. Now I've made up my mind to draw a clear line from him. I don't want any financial entanglement with him, so I've entrusted a lawyer to draw up a division plan for me. I signed my name on the agency contract stroke by stroke. Daniel, I've been lost for too long, and now I'm ready to find myself again. When I left the law firm, I caught a glimpse of the packaged eternal flowers and gifts under the lawyer's desk. The lawyer will also spend Valentine's Day tonight. Only I've been left behind. Why has it come to this? Have I lost my charm? With doubts about myself, I went to a friend's party. The party was held in a friend's seaside villa. When my friend led me into the venue, my eyes were filled with boxer shorts and ruffled swimsuits that didn't match the season. Honey-colored thighs, V-shaped abs, and the youthful bodies spilling out of the warm water pool. Countless blatant looks were cast at me. I seemed to have become a piece of beef waiting to be grilled. Everyone was judging my origin, ripeness, and what kind of aroma I would give off when seasoned. I'm just a beta, and those looks were quickly withdrawn. I sat on the corner sofa with my friend chatting. I saw a handsome and upright college student. He had a good figure. His strong thighs were wrapped in cheap jeans, and his casual white t-shirt couldn't hide his broad shoulders and narrow waist. He didn't go into the water. He just put his hands in his pockets, leaned against the corner, and looked at the laughing crowd with a searching and inquiring look, like a male deer that had strayed into a decadent place. I looked at him, and our eyes met across the space. A few seconds later, he walked towards me through the crowd. He said his name was Henry. He asked if I had any companions. If not, could I consider staying with him today? His overtures were straightforward and enthusiastic, but I instinctively refused. My friend told me not to waste the opportunity and directly gave my contact information to Henry. I left the party after half an hour. After I got home, I received a date invitation from Henry. After much thought, I sent Henry's number to the detective agency. The detective agency quickly gave me his background check report. I'm already used to having control over everything within the safe range. I stayed in the bathroom for a long time. I sat in the bathtub, stroking my own body. It was soft, clean, barren, and emaciated. When my fingers pressed down, they sank deeply with a kind of powerless gauntness. I went on the date. Henry invited me to a high-class Western restaurant. He combed his hair back and wore a suit. It seemed that he had deliberately dressed up to meet me at this place where he didn't usually come. When facing me, he would occasionally unconsciously tug at his collar to relieve the discomfort of being restricted by formal clothes. But he would pull out the chair for me, actively ask about my preferences and dietary taboos, pay attention to his posture, and behave very gentlemanly. It's said that it's very difficult to make a reservation at this Western restaurant. So Henry chose it as our dating place, but actually I'm a black card member of the restaurant. I'm familiar with the prices behind the meals served to me by the waiter. That's not an amount he can easily afford. I looked into his eyes. His eyes were deep, and his two pure and clear pupils were like mountain springs, lake waters, the Milky Way, and also like a pair of deep blue gems that refracted light and shadow into dreams. Are you a mixed race? Hearing this question, Henry lowered his eyes. My mother is Finnish. He has a Western bone structure wrapped in the soft and delicate facial features unique to the East. His thick eyebrows were well defined, and his eyelashes were long, but his skin was so delicate that I couldn't find a single pore. Only then did I realize that he was actually very handsome, as if he had stepped out of an oil painting. I couldn't help but think of that Omega David. I felt that, like David, he was someone who was born to be loved, a masterpiece carved by the gods and a flower nurtured by the devil. I couldn't deny his attractiveness. At that moment, I seemed to understand how Matthew felt. I lowered my head to cut the steak. I looked at my hand. It was well maintained, but too thin. I could see the blue veins under the thin skin. I could see what I had lost on my hand. It was not only time, but also the once full love in me. Why are you chasing me? I don't know either. I spotted you at a glance in the crowd. Maybe you looked like an out-of-place work of art at that noisy and vulgar party. You are graceful and elegant, but also seem to be covered with cracks. I stopped cutting the steak and lost my appetite. Actually, I didn't want to eat in the first place. I put down the fork and met Henry's gaze. I want to do something for you. Henry looked at me frankly, not hiding the infatuation in his eyes at all. I turned my head to look out of the window. Coincidentally, I saw David and Matthew outside the glass window. It was still a bit cold in February. David was wearing a silver-gray fur coat, with his small face buried in the long and slender fur. He was holding an ice cream in both hands. Matthew was afraid that he would get cold, so he wrapped him in his overcoat, covered his hands with his big hands, and even blew on them. He showed every kind of care and tenderness. They looked like a perfect match. I thought I would feel heartbroken, but I said calmly, "The couple hugging outside the window, the one on the left is my almost fiancé." Henry's expression froze. He met me at a bachelor party. Obviously, he didn't expect to hear such words. I turned to look at Henry. I thought about his eager eyes, about Matthew, who was equally eager for me back then, and about the lovely couple outside the window just now. I wanted to laugh, but in the end, I just exhaled a puff of turbid air from my chest. But soon he'll be my ex-boyfriend. I took out a room card from my pocket and placed it on the table in front of me. Henry didn't book a room. I did. The card was inlaid with a gold border, and there was a diamond chip in the top left corner, indicating that the room was on the top floor and was a presidential suite. Henry stared blankly at the card for a moment, as if he understood a lot of things. There was neither surprise nor annoyance on his face. He just stood up. "I don't know." He didn't lose his composure, but his body tilted slightly towards the restaurant door. I understood that he wanted to leave. I quietly lowered my eyelids to hide my disappointment and embarrassment. He didn't say anything more. After a moment of silence, I heard footsteps. I saw a pair of plain, styled leather shoes appear in front of me. I didn't even need to look up. Henry knelt down on one knee, grabbed my hanging hand, and looked up at me with his face tilted up. "You're so cunning. As long as I see such an expression on your face, I can't go against any of your expectations." I blinked my eyes in surprise. He stood up, picked up the card, took my hand, and led me away from my seat. He quickly pulled me out of the restaurant. I could see his broad and strong back and his straight neck. I staggered a bit. He led me into the elevator. As soon as the elevator door closed, he turned around and held my face with his fingers that had a bit of callus. "Is this your revenge for his infidelity?"
No.
He lowered his head and kissed me. His lips were burning hot and well-defined. I got entangled with him, as if I was instantly caught in a storm and lost my senses. It's also like falling into a torrent. I hang on his shoulders, tightly clutching him like the only floating log. I'm like a wave, surging in with great force. But in the end, I just crash against the boundless shore, leaving behind vanishing foam at the edge. At dawn, I wake up in Henry's arms.
Maitus orevarm.
I stick a hand out from under the quilt and look at the back of my hand. The tips of my fingers glow with a warm pink. Henry hugs me from behind and nuzzles me affectionately. I reach back and stroke the back of his head. "I thought you'd leave. Is that what you want?"
No.
I turn around, cup Henry's face in my hands, looking at his messy hair and the faint stubble on his face, and his young, intense, and somewhat sleepy eyes. I feel as if I've gone back 7 years ago, filled with a sense of the passage of time and the changes of the world. "Stay a little longer." I close my eyes and press my lips against his. I originally thought I'd run into Matthew when I got home, but as it turns out, he and David had a wonderful night together and flew straight to Europe for a trip. To show his consideration, he asked the butler to give me a bouquet of flowers and a gift. I take the lilies from the butler, find a vase and put them in it. I open the gift box, and inside is a newly released custom-made bag from a luxury brand. I casually throw it to the butler and ask him to put it away in the cloakroom for me. The butler looks at me, hesitates for a long time, and then says, "Sir, did you have a good night last night?" He watched me grow up. After I moved in with Matthew, I brought him along. He cares about me a lot, so I don't mind his overstepping. I touch my neck, where there should be 1 or 2 hickeys. Is it very obvious? The butler shakes his head. You look in good spirits. That makes me feel relieved. Hearing his words, I look up at him. His eyes were kind and gentle. Suddenly, I thought that during the long period of being single, in order to deal with such embarrassment, I had unknowingly become numb. I was completely unaware of pain and had lost my sensitivity to care. Now, when I saw his considerate look in the eyes, the soreness welled up like a tide into every crack in my body. My eyes turned red. I smiled at him and then turned around and went upstairs. In the following days, I was tidying up the small villa where I lived before cohabiting with Matthew and getting ready to move back. I left Henry behind. I wanted to return to my own life. I didn't want to pin all my happiness on one or two men. I drew a strict safety line for myself. Henry sent me a message asking if I had arrived home. I didn't reply. He called me, but I didn't answer. He was sensible enough not to contact me anymore. On a Wednesday, I had an appointment with the wife of the city police chief. A mutual friend of ours had opened a gallery, and we agreed to go to support it together. The wife of the city police chief sent a row of magnificent big flower baskets. I only asked someone to take a few paintings there. Our mutual friend showed equal happiness for the gifts, but when walking side by side, he only held my hand. He introduced the paintings in his gallery to me. Most of them were works of emerging painters, and there were also some masterpieces, but few could attract me. The paintings were just the same old paintings, either wild, or serene, or grand, or bright, all staying properly in those long and short frames. As I looked at them all the way, I felt nothing. I was about to buy 2 paintings casually to make our mutual friend happy when the wife of the city police chief suddenly asked me, "What perfume are you wearing today?" Perfume? Ah, could it be pheromones? But you're a beta. I stopped and smelled my wrist. Our mutual friend also smelled around my neck. Both he and the wife of the police chief were omegas and had a certain sensitivity to pheromones. The mutual friend said firmly, "It's cedar. It's deeply ingrained." The wife of the police chief laughed. "I heard that your fiancé has been traveling with another omega recently. I thought there was something wrong with your relationship as a young couple. Now it seems that it's all a rumor." I smiled, still looking perfect. Our parents strongly encouraged the marriage between Matthew and me, and I've been keeping it from them. I don't plan to tell anyone about those things until I've decently severed ties with Matthew. The sheriff's wife stopped smiling and pretended to be confused, saying, "But isn't Matthew's pheromone the scent of brandy?" As soon as she said that, the atmosphere between us turned cold. My friend who was holding my arm paused, reflexively trying to pull her arm out, but finally didn't move. She just said awkwardly, "What are you talking nonsense about?" I sprayed some cedar-scented perfume. I replied calmly, "It's a new product from a perfume studio I just acquired that hasn't been released yet. There are a total of 12 types called Scented Boyfriend, which can perfectly mimic pheromones. If you're interested, I'll send you 2 sets some other day." The sheriff's wife's face stiffened. "I see." I laughed. They laughed with me. Suddenly, I felt bored with the false pretense in front of me and walked away from them. A painting in the corner caught my eye. In the painting, there was a garden. A young boy was sitting bare-footed on the grass. It seemed that his toe had been pricked by a rose, and he was pulling out the thorns from his foot. But his eyes were always fixed on the fairy in the garden. The fairy was white and naked, like a broken porcelain statue, with rose thorns and roots hanging from the cracks. When I saw the signature and date on the painting, I stopped smiling. I looked down at my watch and then showed it to my friends. "I was joking with you. I've really got a new boyfriend. I have to go to him. See you later." I waved goodbye, leaving them standing there not knowing what expression to put on, and walked out of the gallery. I asked the driver to take me to Henry's studio, which was next to Henry's school. We drove the eye-catching luxury car into a shabby alley near the campus, and I stepped onto the dim and damp stairs in my expensive clothes. I knocked on the peeling wooden door, and then I saw Henry, with his sleeves rolled up, wearing a work apron and covered in paint spots, peer at the door. He saw me and looked utterly stunned. I noticed a white plastic string tied around the door, with a card hanging on it that read, "Working hours. No entry without permission." I stepped through the string, pushed Henry to the ground, and closed the door. There was no one in the studio. I should be immune to pheromones, but at this moment, I seemed to smell a strong scent of cedar, and I felt a surge of excitement from the tips of my toes. Henry didn't dare to touch me. I took his hand and placed it on my face. It turned out that Henry was a painter. I touched the paint with my warm fingers. Those vivid colors seemed to rekindle the vitality in my soul. My chest was in turmoil, and it seemed as if something was sprouting from deep within. I devoured, exploited, and relied on his young and exuberant love. Henry kissed me and asked, "Why did you come here?" I asked him, "Do you want to hold an art exhibition?" "Yes." "Do you need to paint a lot of paintings for an art exhibition?" "Yes." "Do you need models?" He hugged my sweaty back tightly and reverently pressed his lips against my pinkish earlobe. "You are my muse." I stayed with Henry for 3 days and 2 nights. When I went home, I was wearing Henry's t-shirt and jeans. He is much taller and bigger than me. I need to pleat the waist of the jeans and fasten the belt buckle to the smallest hole so that the pants won't slip off my waist. I walked in the door with the painting Henry drew for me. As soon as I looked up, I found Matthew sitting in the living room. He obviously hadn't seen me like this for a long time, and his expression was a bit surprised. I couldn't help touching my collarbone, where there were tooth marks left by Henry. "They said you've got a young boyfriend. It seems to be true. Is your trip over?" I walked over, still feeling a dull ache between my thighs. I put the painting in my hand on the display cabinet in the living room, took a few steps back to admire it, and ignored Matthew's gaze. Matthew walked behind me and looked at the painting with me. "Did he paint it?" "Yes. It's really well painted." I rarely pay attention to my own appearance, because I'm too familiar with it, and perhaps also too disappointed. In the painting, I'm lying half reclined on the sofa, completely naked. There's a canvas beneath me. My slender neck is resting on a feather pillow. My bony yet gracefully lined hands are gently placed on my abdomen and legs. My legs are crossed and pressed together, and my posture is calm and docile. He painted me very beautifully. My curled eyelashes, slightly upturned lip peaks, and the nose that looks like a drop of water dotted on my face are all beautiful. The charm in the corners of my long eyes is also beautiful. He loves me, so I've grown roots from a cracked porcelain vase and blossomed. I turned my head and thanked Matthew. "Thank you." His expression froze for a moment at my smile. "What for?" "For giving me the chance to meet him." Matthew's Adam's apple bobbed up and down. He pursed his lips and smiled at me. "Then can I choose my own reward?" I nodded. "Yes." Then he reached out and picked me up around the waist. I was caught off guard and a bit stunned. I looked up and saw his firm jaw. He was taking me to his bedroom, looking rather interested. I understood, but then again, I didn't. Why had he not touched me for 2 years and suddenly become curious about me? I quickly realized that perhaps he just wanted to remind me that he could still control me. He placed me on the bed and loosened his tie. There was a smoldering fire in his eyes. I was inexplicably sober and wanted to see what he was up to, so I openly observed him. He was a very typical alpha, with a more handsome appearance than many others. One could even say that he had all the advantages of his bloodline. He was arrogant, proper, and radiant, like a golden peacock. As long as he wanted, he could seamlessly switch between being suave and noble. He was unruly when he was young and gradually became more steady as he matured. Of course, I had loved him. I had all the right conditions, so we got together, even though he made me gradually fall apart. All I wanted was to remove him from my life. Matthew leaned over, propping his hand on the pillow beside me, and said hoarsely, "You're a bit distracted."
Sorry.
Because he was so close. He saw the tooth mark Henry had left on my neck. My swollen, hot, and broken-skinned wound was being repeatedly stimulated by his fingertips. His expression was hard to read, as if he were also looking at a painting. "It seems you've had a great time these days. Do you like him a lot?" I admitted, "Yes." Matthew frowned and asked, "Because he's a painter?" "Yes. I studied business administration at university because of my family. Originally, I wanted to go to an art academy. Does he know we're getting married?" I tugged at the corner of my mouth and didn't answer this question. "You'd better choose someone else. It's obvious that he has a strong possessive desire. He has left very deep marks on you," Matthew said in a flat tone, increasing the pressure of his thumb on my neck as if trying to rub off the marks there. "I can't smell it, but pheromones don't lie. You're a beta, and he spent a lot of effort to entangle his scent on you. Maybe he did it unconsciously, but obviously he wants to drive away everyone except himself." I shivered. I recalled the frown on Henry's face when we were entangled. I thought he was deeply immersed in desire at that time. I stretched out my finger to smooth his frown, but he grabbed my palm, increasing the pressure while kissing my palm. Just as I stretched out my hands to push Matthew off me, his phone rang. The ringtone was obviously set specifically for David, so Matthew got up without hesitation and answered the phone. "What's wrong?" I don't know what was said on the other end of the phone. His face changed, and he hung up the phone and walked out. I asked knowingly, "Who was it?" Matthew didn't hide it from me. "David's heat period has arrived. I have to rush over right away, or he'll go to someone else." I thought it was absurd. "You haven't marked him?" Matthew laughed. "I don't know how long my feelings for him will last, and neither does he. I still have this much self-awareness." This surprised me. I thought David was Matthew's true love, but it seems that's not the case. I let out a long sigh. "Let's break up. Be with David properly." Matthew stopped at the door, seemingly a bit unhappy. "I've already said that you're irreplaceable. Why are you jealous of him? Wait until his heat period is over, and I'll come back and explain it to you properly." He still left me, only leaving me with a flimsy, "come back and explain," and then just walked away. And I actually breathed a sigh of relief. I moved out of the home I shared with Matthew and returned to my own villa with the butler. I indulged myself and went in and out with Henry. I reduced various social gatherings in the circle and began to appear on the university campus wearing casual shorts and sportswear. I would stay in Henry's studio drinking milk tea and eating hamburgers, with only the paint he smeared on me all over my body. I would also take Henry to a high-end restaurant for dinner, have clothes custom, made by a designer I was familiar with, then lead Henry to various art salons, introduce Henry to the well-known figures in the industry I knew, and embrace him in the villa's swimming pool at night. Henry never refused me. He seemed to take all my actions calmly, but when our limbs were close to each other, he would cautiously bring his nose to my neck to smell my scent, secretly tighten his limbs and interlock with my ribs, as if he wanted to embed me into his own body. Sometimes I would feel guilty because I still couldn't give Henry a clear relationship. Matthew made me exhausted, tired, and full of defenses. I told Henry more than once that he could leave me at any time. I've heard that love at first sight is the most loyal choice of genes. That is to say, I love you based on my instinct. Every cell in my body craves you, and I'm falling for you every minute. If I could leave, I would have left long ago. So please don't say such cruel words. Please hold on to me as if you love me too. These words were like a spell. I lost my resistance and got deeper and deeper. Then, I received a letter. It was the 100th day since I got to know Henry. I wanted to give him a surprise, so I bought a lot of nourishing ingredients and planned to cook for Henry. I took 2 bottles of red wine from the wine cabinet at home. When I went out, I actually saw Matthew. He stood at my door and asked me puzzledly, "You've moved back." I was shocked. I didn't expect that he had been staying at David's place for these dozens of days and never went back to check. But it didn't matter anymore. I emphasized to him, "We've broken up. It's my fault. I came back late. Matthew rarely apologized to me. Come back with me. I'm not used to it when I go home and don't see you." Turned out that he came to pick me up. I don't understand how his mind works. I have something to do. I didn't intend to haggle with him anymore. Matthew looked at the bag in my hand with a complicated look on his face. "Are you going to cook for him?" "Yes. It's been a long time since I last ate something you cooked." I looked down at the plastic bag. The ham, truffle, caviar, etc. In the bag were all things that Matthew was tired of eating on a daily basis. In the past, when I cooked them and put them on the table, he wouldn't even take a look. "Ask David to cook for you. You don't like these." Matthew looked at me without saying a word. I could see that he was a little disappointed. But compared with my feelings over the years, what was his little disappointment? He reached out to hold my hand, and I put my hand behind my back. "David is very well behaved. He won't fight with you." Matthew still didn't understand the situation between us. He withdrew his hand dejectedly and said, "Most of my heart belongs to you." I was too lazy to talk to him. "I'll come back when you calm down." He left. I entered the garage, put the ingredients in the trunk of the plain-looking car, and then climbed into the driver's seat myself. After getting along with Henry, I felt that vitality had returned to my body. I wanted to do everything myself when I was with him. I even didn't want the driver to take me. I drove to the studio. When I opened the door, I found that Henry wasn't there. I thought Henry would come back soon, so I sat on the sofa and waited. As a result, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was still the only one in the studio. I called Henry. He answered and said a few words in a hurry, meaning that he was dragged by the professor to attend an art-related dinner and couldn't leave now. I was a bit disappointed, but still asked for the address of the dinner. I put the ingredients into the fridge I bought in the corner of the studio and then drove to the dinner. An invitation was required to enter the place. I called the organizer, and he came out to greet me with a big smile. I walked among the well-dressed people in simple clothes with a natural look. I was already tired of such a flashy occasion. I didn't care about the looks cast on me at all. Instead, I felt more relaxed than ever. I saw Henry's uneasy figure in a corner of the banquet hall. He didn't have time to change his clothes and was led by a somewhat short and thin middle-aged man with white hair among a group of well-dressed and pot-bellied art dealers. He seemed not to want to disappoint his teacher, so he had a smile on his face, but his cheekbones and shoulders showed an unnatural stiffness. Just as I was about to walk over, someone patted me on the shoulder. I turned my head and unexpectedly saw Matthew. "Why are you here?" He was wearing a suit, with his hair slicked back and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He still looked elegant, noble, proud, and yet despicable. David was dressed very elegantly and was holding his arm, looking at me thoughtfully. There was a similarly tall and handsome young nobleman following behind him. After seeing me, he gave me a look of surprise. "Who is this?" Matthew introduced me to him on his own. "My wife." He said it so naturally that David lowered his eyes and looked away. The young nobleman's expression instantly stiffened, seemingly very embarrassed about the current situation. Matthew smiled and pulled me over, holding me in front of his chest. "Don't mind. We got married by agreement and we each do our own thing. If you want to pursue her, I don't mind." The young nobleman was at a loss for words. His eyes darted between me and Matthew, and he honestly let out a hiss. I frowned and removed the hand on my shoulder. I turned to look in Henry's direction. He didn't notice me. Today is a relatively special day for me. I don't want his mood to be affected by Matthew. I gave up getting close to him. I casually took a glass of champagne from a waiter and invited the young nobleman to go outside to the garden to have a chat in the breeze right in front of Matthew. The young nobleman was flattered and glanced at Matthew several times. I took the lead and started walking, and he finally followed me. I looked back and saw Matthew standing still, with an unpredictable expression on his face. I found a bench in a secluded corner of the garden and sat down. It was only after I had settled that I noticed several couples having trysts not far away. I felt a bit melancholy. The young nobleman hesitated whether to sit beside me. I patted the chair, and he sat down. I clinked glasses with him, drank champagne, and then chatted. As expected, the young nobleman was the young master of a certain aristocratic family. He had been studying abroad and had only returned in recent days. He sighed. I didn't expect the domestic social circle to be as chaotic as that of the Westerners. I burst out laughing. He quickly tried to make amends. I don't mean you're chaotic. You seem quite nice. I am indeed quite nice. I'm the only child in the family and a beta. There are many things beyond my control. I have a wildness and a jungle in my heart, but I have to trim it into the shape of an artificial landscape. I'm bound by the responsibilities on my shoulders. I'm well-bred, like a lifeless flower on a high mountain. So when I learned that Matthew, who is arrogant, unrestrained, and radiant, was my arranged marriage partner, I was extremely grateful and unhesitatingly fell in love. In fact, an arranged marriage is just an arranged marriage. Matthew is always Matthew. I need to face the essence beneath this relationship and bear the consequences of my choice. For the young nobleman, it was just a moment ago that he finished speaking, but my mind had already turned several times. I tilted my head against the back of the chair, and my slender neck showed a hint of pale fragility in the night. The young nobleman suddenly coughed, straightened his back in front of me, and put on a show like a peacock spreading its tail. He said, "You two are in a marriage of convenience. Is it true? How old are you?" 21. Young peacock. Of course I know what this young master means by asking this question. He's a bit like Matthew in his youth, perhaps a bit more frivolous and perhaps less confident. But he has good looks and may be used to flirting with women and knows how to show his charm. I subconsciously wanted to say that I already had a boyfriend, but then I thought it was ridiculous. I've never defined my relationship with Henry. In this seemingly open relationship, does it really matter whether I'm involved with 2, 3, or 4 men? The cool breeze made me feel lazy. I was all loose. Then the young master leaned over as if he wanted to kiss me. My body was more honest than my mind. I put my hand up just as the young master was about to press his lips on mine, and he was stunned. Sorry. I suddenly stood up and then turned around and ran into the banquet hall. I'm going to find Henry. Actually, I've already realized that I accept Henry just because he is Henry. I'm a bit panicked. I need to see Henry. I need to confirm. I bumped into a chest. I looked up and saw Matthew. It turned out that he had been standing not far away watching me. He saw the panic on my face. He subconsciously grabbed my wrist, and I subconsciously tried to break free from him. Let go of me. Don't go over there. I said let go of me. Matthew trapped me in his arms and held me so tightly that my bones creaked. He had a complicated look on his face but just patted my back to calm me down. Don't go over there. Just now. And Alpha suddenly entered the susceptible period. The situation is very dangerous. You can't smell it, but now the banquet hall is filled with a pungent smell of pheromones. I was stunned. What smell? Cedar. Suddenly I found that David wasn't beside Matthew. I was shocked. I used all my strength to shake off Matthew's hand and even stepped on his foot hard. Then I turned around and rushed into the banquet hall. The banquet hall was already half empty. I saw a dark figure rolling on the floor of the banquet hall. A security guard tried to use an anti-riot fork to hold him, but the man bent the fork with one hand. Looking more closely, I found that there were 2 people entangled with each other, Henry and David. Henry was covered in sweat, with the veins on his forehead bulging. He tightly grabbed David's clothes, while David was half hanging on Henry. Maybe he was induced into the susceptible period by the pheromones, and even his neck was flushed pink, like a wilted flower wrinkled by water droplets just taken out of the water. I heard the security guard covering his nose say, "This pheromone is so strong." I heard another security guard say, "Quickly separate them with the riot forks." I remembered that Henry said he loved me because of instinct, and my attraction to him came from genes. I believed him, but what could surpass the attraction of an omega to an alpha and the alpha's instinctive desire for an omega? Suddenly, my eyes were blurred with tears. I love him. The moment I confirmed this, I shattered. I had developed numerous cracks during the long period of dryness, and I could still manage to stay intact. But now I'm broken. I heard a clear cracking sound in my chest. It split into countless tiny and sharp fragments, which pierced into my internal organs and traveled through every blood vessel with my heavy heartbeat. Then, even my fingertips started to sting. I covered my eyes, and tears rolled down through my fingers. The security guard said again,
No.
"He's pushing the omega away." Another security guard said, "Look, he's coming." I was hugged by a sweaty body. I was familiar with the warmth of that body. I knew who was holding me and felt relieved. I couldn't lift my head and just kept crying. Matthew covered his nose and rushed into the door. He saw Henry pressing me tightly in his arms. I had no scent, but he still buried his head in my neck and let out greedy breathing sounds. "Sorry. I can't control myself." "Sorry." Henry struggled to put the words together. "Can I take you away? I want to take you away. Can I?" My answer was to wrap my arms around Henry's neck. Henry picked me up horizontally in full view of everyone. I could feel the restrained tremors beneath his iron-hard muscles. I didn't even glance at Matthew standing not far away. Instead, I looked up and kissed Henry, gently breathing in his ear. "My car is on the left side of the parking lot. I've experienced an alpha's susceptible period before, but I still can't get used to Henry's loss of control. I can't be like an omega. I'm like a sacrifice." Henry enveloped me, like the night clouds, like a dream woven with stars and moons.
I'm flowing. I'm afraid.
I'm delighted, and I'm merging with his love. We stayed in the car for a long time. At night, Henry fell asleep on the back seat cushion of the car, quiet as a baby. I propped myself up, drove him back to the studio, kissed his restless eyelids, and wished him sweet dreams. When I got back home, I had a fever for 3 days. On the 4th day, Henry was gone. I couldn't find him anymore. He seemed to have vanished into thin air. First, I was shocked and disappointed. I hired a detective agency to look for him, but to no avail. I was extremely panicked, and then I had to get used to it. Matthew still clung to me persistently. He invited me to a new party. I met many more flashy guys there, but I couldn't divert my attention. When I was at a loss, I would go to the studio. I renewed the lease because no one had canceled it. That shabby studio was still there. The floor still creaked when stepped on. The ink on the unfinished painting had dried, and the paint had clumped, which I would pick off with my fingernails. A month later, I found that letter on the studio sofa. There was no signature. I opened the letter and saw a photo. I saw David arm in arm with Henry, smiling innocently and intimately close to him. I felt dizzy. I went to see David. He was waiting for me at the coffee shop. When I saw him, he looked haggard. The sense of being like rain that I once marveled at was gone. I could see his pain and gloom. There were dark circles under his eyes. His lips were chapped. His hair was as brittle as dry grass, and his clothes were haphazardly worn with loose threads showing. Obviously, he didn't come to show off to me. He wanted to reveal a secret to me. He was suffering, and that secret seemed to be able to tear out a breath of vitality from his stagnant depression. With the worst guess in mind, I sat in front of him. When he whispered to me, I straightened my back and habitually maintained my impeccable posture and my precarious self-esteem. As I gradually learned the truth, cold anger swept over me. At the same time, I felt like I was sinking into a swamp. David's face spun and distorted in the swamp. I saw his mouth opening and closing, but all I heard were the sticky popping sounds of bubbles in the mud. David and Henry came from the same orphanage. They were childhood sweethearts. Before they could develop feelings for each other, Henry encountered an art exhibition that changed his life, and David met Matthew, who also changed his life. Henry worked part-time to learn painting for his dream. David was quickly conquered by Matthew's charm. Knowing it was immoral, he still got into bed with Matthew. Matthew provided David with whatever he needed materially. Henry didn't know about David's situation and only regarded David as a suddenly rich friend. They always kept in touch. Just a few months ago, David got pregnant and told Matthew about it. Matthew seemed very happy and asked him to give birth to the child with peace of mind, and told him that he would arrange everything. After a while, Matthew brought him in front of me and announced that we had an open relationship. Unexpectedly, I didn't make things difficult for him. I sneered. "I didn't know you were pregnant. How absurd." David sighed. "I knew he didn't tell you, but as long as you accept the arranged marriage and have other partners, then he'll have an excuse to persuade you to accept this child." So, I couldn't say the rest. I was almost suffocating. I suspected that Henry was sent by David to tempt me to degenerate faster. Those words were like needles in my throat. I couldn't spit them out or swallow them. Felt like my chest was frozen. David looked at me sincerely and said,
No.
"He has nothing to do with this." My body temperature quickly returned to normal, and my shoulders relaxed. Only then did I notice that I had dug several fingernail marks into my palm. Well, it's not entirely unrelated. He can seduce people just with that face of his, but he's a straightforward and stupid guy. I know him well. You're the type he'd fall for. He spends all day painting with his head down. I advised him to meet more people and look for inspiration, so I sent him to your friend's party. Look, it was Valentine's Day, the perfect time and place. He really fell head over heels for you at first sight. You had a detective agency investigate his background. I intercepted the report you got and removed the parts related to me. And then, as expected, you two got together. When he loves someone, his love shines through his whole being. I believe no one can resist him like that. I took a deep breath. So that's how it is. David continued. Things were going smoothly until that night when he suddenly entered his susceptible period and took me away from the banquet hall. Matthew found out about the whole thing and was extremely angry. He tied Henry up and took him to a suburban villa. Then he beat Henry up in front of David and told David that it was the price for his own initiative. Matthew told Henry to find an excuse to leave me, but Henry refused. So Matthew had someone break Henry's hand. David regretted involving the innocent Henry and had a big fight with Matthew. Then he was dragged away and locked up. For the next few days, David was left to fend for himself in the villa and was forgotten by everyone. He finally managed to break the window and escape from the villa. He wanted to go to Matthew to sort things out, but at the downstairs of Matthew's company, he saw a beautiful woman hugging Matthew. He hadn't eaten for days. He was hungry and thirsty, and his clothes were torn. He looked extremely miserable. The woman saw him and laughed at him, saying he looked like a beggar. Matthew also laughed and said that he did look like one, like a delusional beggar who didn't know his own place. David looked miserable. I had the baby aborted. I ignored his self-pity and just tightened my grip on the coffee cup in front of me. Where is he? David shook his head. I don't know. I reported it to the security department, but it was no use. I won't sympathize with you. You brought this on yourself. Yes, those who make mistakes will pay the price. David lowered his head. His eyes were flickering, like a trapped animal in the dark. He used to be the well-behaved Omega in Matthew's eyes. Maybe for the sake of the baby, he planned all this and then tasted the bitter fruit. I'll leave here. David forced a smile. Maybe I shouldn't have gotten involved in the first place. I went to Matthew's company and burst into the top floor office. Matthew's secretary was sitting on his desk, hooking his tie with her finger, and he was breathing in her ear with a flirtatious smile on his face. Seeing me enter, the secretary hurriedly jumped off the table, picked up her high heels, and fled with her head down. Meanwhile, Matthew just tugged at his tie and adjusted his expression back to what I usually saw. "Why have you come?" I looked at his miraculously perfect face, a face that was proud, cruel, and extremely charming. I used to love him so much. I sincerely rejoiced that he had plucked me from among the many blooming flowers for him, even though he had only stayed briefly and then gone away. "Where is he?" Matthew's expression froze for a moment. "What are you talking about?" "I know everything. He's just an ordinary college student." I shouted at the top of my lungs. "You broke his hand. You threw him into a place where no one could find him. I could turn a blind eye to all the other despicable things you've done. But I thought you were at least a decent man." Matthew also roared. "Then what do you want me to do? Do you want me to watch you pour all your heart into him and let him steal you away right in front of my eyes?" I had never seen him so out of control. I was utterly incredulous. It seemed that he had forgotten that he had once proposed an open relationship to me. He acted as if I were the one who had betrayed him. I asked him, "Wasn't it you who wanted to leave me without any burdens?" Matthew refused to admit it. "It's a misunderstanding. You two almost had a child. It's just a child. Having fun outside and getting married are two different things. No one is more suitable for this position than you. I won't disrupt my current life. You'd better understand this as soon as possible." "So you originally planned to let me raise your illegitimate child? It'll be under your name. Anyway, you're a beta. It's very difficult for you to have a child, isn't it?" I was extremely disappointed. I took out the separation agreement prepared by my lawyer from my bag and threw it on the table. It was just a few thin sheets of paper, yet the sound of them hitting the table was as heavy as that of iron sheets. Gu Haojing looked at the papers on the table and then at me. His expression finally lost its composure. "All our prenuptial properties are listed here. There won't be any post-nuptial properties either. The shares, houses, cars, and shops have been sorted out clearly. I'll talk to our parents. Let's break up." "Is it all because of that, Henry?"
No.
"It's because I feel sick whenever I see you." Matthew picked up the separation agreement and tore it into several pieces without even looking. After tearing it, he threw the pieces away, reached across the table, grabbed my collar, and forced me against him. He gritted his teeth. "Have you forgotten that our relationship is essentially a business alliance? It's not up to you to decide as you please. Once we break up, a large number of people will come swarming in, digging out or fabricating countless negative news stories, vivid and lifelike. The business reputations of our two families will decline, and the related business cooperation will also be affected. You don't want to put your family in a difficult position, do you? I've already announced to the media that I'm single again. If they're interested, they might come here soon. So you'd better release the person you're holding right now, or I'll make this whole thing even more embarrassing." I stood my ground, and his face gradually distorted. I saw the veins popping out on his forehead. He was frustrated, desperate, and then enraged. "Throw a tantrum if you want. I won't break up with you. No matter how big a scene you make, I'll find someone to suppress it. You're crazy." The knock on the door came in time. Matthew let go of me and asked the secretary to come in. The secretary told us that there were many reporters downstairs. I sneered at him. Matthew took out his phone and made a video call. I saw Henry tied up with his eyes blindfolded and thrown in an old shack on his phone screen. Tears welled up in my eyes and spilled over. "I can let you keep seeing him, or I can send him back to you piece by piece. You'd better think clearly about what to say to the reporters later. At this point, Matthew had lost all sense of dignity. I realized his selfishness. He just wanted to maintain his current life. Maybe he had feelings for me, but he only loved himself. He would never break up with me anyway. He put his arm around me and went downstairs to meet the reporters. I wore a perfect smile and told the reporters that it was all a misunderstanding and that our relationship as a young couple was stable. I kissed his face, but in fact, my lips were cold. Malice seeped out of my pores. I whispered in his ear, with venom flowing from my tongue.
I'm pregnant.
Matthew's face changed. He couldn't show his anger in front of the reporters, so he just tightened his grip on my waist. As long as you dare to lay a finger on him and this child, every day I'm alive, I'll do everything in my power to die with you. I smiled sweetly. The reporters thought we were having an intimate conversation and let out envious sighs one after another. Matthew pulled me to stand still, and we pressed our faces together for the reporters to take pictures. Do you have to go crazy like this? Since you like being a cuckold so much, enjoy it to the fullest. Matthew released Henry but kept him under house arrest in an orphanage abroad. In exchange, we still got engaged. A few months passed, and the child was born smoothly. I gave the child my surname. Matthew told the media during an interview that he respected his partner's right and had no objections to it. I lived in my private villa with the child. I took good care of the child and put all my heart into her. I would write letters to Henry and send him pictures of the child. After Henry recovered from his injuries without any sequelae, he painted every day and occasionally sent me paintings of small flowers and grass. Life didn't seem particularly miserable. The people around Matthew kept changing, but I didn't care at all now. Those who make mistakes will all pay the price. I believed this. Before long, Matthew's retribution came. The next time I saw Matthew was in the intensive care unit of the hospital. He contracted a serious and embarrassing illness from someone because of his infidelity. He was already terminally ill. His parents asked me to go and see him for the last time. Matthew was lying on the hospital bed, wearing an oxygen mask. His once vibrant face was now ashen, and his whole body was so emaciated that he was just skin and bones. He seemed to not even have the strength to turn his head and just squinted at me with half-open eyes. I lifted his head and fluffed up the pillow for him so that his face was facing me. I saw that the corners of his eyes suddenly became wet. He had never faced setbacks in his life, but in the end, he was in a sorry state. All the elegance and charm were gone, leaving only a stench of filth on him. I originally didn't want you to see this. I won't sympathize with you. This is your own doing. Will you go to find him? Then, just leave now. I'll wait a bit. Anyway, it won't be long. We were silent, facing each other. Matthew seemed to have gathered a little strength and slowly turned his head away, looking at the ceiling. Do you still remember what happened that night when we decided to be together? I remember. It was a terrible banquet. Maybe he was a bit unwilling and drank too much. He passed out drunk on the garden bench, with his clothes in disarray and lipstick marks from a woman still on his face. I went out for some fresh air, afraid that he would catch a cold. I covered him with my clothes and waited beside him. The moonlight was just right. I looked at the face of my future husband, and my heart started beating faster and faster uncontrollably. Before long, he woke up, blinked his eyes at me, then smiled at me and said that the sound of my heartbeat was disturbing him. Then he fell asleep on me again. I've always been waiting for him, always waiting. I said calmly, I don't remember. Matthew gently blinked his eyes. That day, the moon was very beautiful. I looked at you, and the tips of your ears were red. So cute. At that time, I even thought of names for our future children. A strange glow appeared on his face, as if life had briefly returned to him. He reached out his hand into the air. I followed his gaze and looked at the ceiling. I didn't know what Matthew was grabbing at, while Gu Gujing had a blissful look on his face. Maybe he had caught what he wanted most. A dream. It's just, I later forgot again. His hand dropped onto the bed. The heart monitor beeped and showed a straight line. My eyes welled up with tears and I quickly lowered my head. The sound of the door opening rang out, and his family and nurses rushed in. I couldn't hear what they were saying clearly. I stared at the ground covered with circular water stains of different sizes. My waiting was over. Half a month later, I took the child on a plane and headed to an orphanage in a small town in Country F. I didn't inform Henry. When I arrived at the orphanage, he was still painting in an empty classroom. I pushed open the door and stepped into a riot of colors. I had been feeling anxious before. I was afraid that he would hold a grudge against me, and also afraid that, after a long separation, our affection would fade when we met again, leaving only awkwardness between us. But when I stood at the door, I found that the classroom was filled with portrait paintings of various styles. I recognized the curved eyelashes, the slightly upturned lip peak, the nose that dotted the face like a drop of water, and the slender neck of the person in the painting. I also recognized the docile limbs, the canvas beneath, the sofa, and the vines and roots that protruded from the cracks between the fingertips. My child pulled my hand and said, "Dad, is that you?" Yes. Hundreds of paintings. All of them were of me. The person who had been burying his head in painting in the corner suddenly straightened up and turned around when he heard my child's voice. I saw that face with features as sharp as if carved by a knife, thick eyebrows that were clearly defined, and eyes as blue as a lake. I saw him smile. He stood up, rushed towards me quickly, and hugged me into his arms. His arms tightened around the back of my neck, and I could feel his excited yet restrained muscles. I hugged him back. He filled the years that had separated us with those paintings. It was as if I had just stepped out of the studio and taken a couple of turns, and nothing had changed. "You're back." Henry felt the warmth on his shoulder, looked up, and held my wet face in his hands. He wiped away my tears with his thumb, his eyes full of pity. What should I do? I just realized that my muse looks so ugly when she cries. How can I paint for the rest of my life? I laughed out loud. You'll have to put up with it even if it's ugly. We kissed each other, and I melted in his arms. Our child frowned as he watched us kiss passionately, covered his eyes, and then turned to look out of the window. Through his fingers, he saw the warm sun outside the window, the grass growing and the orioles flying, and the petals dancing gracefully in the wind. Spring has come.